Hello, my name is James Koranyi and I'm a cultural historian of East Central Europe at Durham University. And what I want to do today is to think about what internationalism means and how we can approach it in research. And I want to think about one specific year in Romania, 1977, to unpack the tensions around international cooperation and national politics. And then I want to segue into the tension that exists today around natural catastrophes, calls for internationalism, and yet the strength of the nation state. Now, 1977 was a hugely eventful and, for the regime at least, a very uncertain year in Romania. On the 4th of March that year, a powerful earthquake rocked the southeast of the country, including the capital city, Bucharest, but also cities like Brașov and Galați, killing more than 1,500 people. It sent in more than one way shockwaves through Romania and punctured the illusion of socialist progress. Now, Ceausescu, as very often during his career, was abroad in Nigeria, forging precisely those international links. But then he got news of it while he was abroad, and official responses to the earthquake were very mal-coordinated and insufficient. They didn't seem to have a grip on it, and we can see this in the kind of paternalistic way that the international press looked upon the situation in Romania. Now, all the while, if we think about what internationalism was happening in Romania at the time, there was a young Romanian-German dissident called Anton Sterbling, who had left the country in 1975 but had returned to Romania in February 1977, just before the earthquake struck. And his plan was to travel to Bucharest and to meet the fairly famous Romanian writer and dissident Paul Goma in Bucharest. And Goma had been an on and off dissident from the mid-1950s onwards, really. And by 1977, Goma was trying to set up a sort of Romanian Charter 77, following very much the model of the Czechoslovak Charter 77. He'd expressed publicly sympathy with those Czechoslovak dissidents. And Sterbling was on his way to visit Goma in Bucharest as part of a network of German and Romanian dissidents, very much a sort of international dissidents. And it was almost ready to be formed, to sort of create those connections across the Iron Curtain. But then the earthquake struck. And Sterbling never made it beyond the Carpathians, and instead he stayed in the west of the country meeting friends and colleagues who he'd known for quite some time. And then he left Romania on the 15th of March. But Goma, of course, would play an important role in opposition to Ceausescu beyond this. But still, those international networks were severed by this earthquake. And just a few months later, at the beginning of August 1977, the miners of the Jiu Valley in central Romania began a 3-day strike against the regime because of cuts to the miners' disability allowances. And it would prove to be the largest protest movement in communist Romania right up until the violent end of it in December 1989. So from the 1st of August till the 3rd of August 1977, Ceausescu's position seemed very uncertain while he and Elena Ceausescu holidayed on the Black Sea. For 3 days there was genuine chaos, there were rumours of infiltration by the secret police, and for a while it was unclear whether the leaders of the trade union were working with the officials or whether they were being held captive by the officials. Whatever the case, on the 4th of August 1977 and beyond that, the strike was crushed and the repercussions on the region were very stark. Over the years, many of the miners who had worked there were replaced by new workers from elsewhere in the country, to such an extent that by 1989 the population of the Jiu Valley was substantially different from what it had been in the mid-1970s. Now, equally important, though, was the breakdown of trust between trade unionists, the government, and trade union leaders. Miners and factory workers simply no longer trusted neither the state nor trade union officials because of those rumours about infiltration and so on. So what you see 2 years after 1977 is a new movement, an independent trade union being set up. Controversial, it's very controversial, I won't go into it, known as the Free Trade Union of the Working People of Romania. It's set up by Ionel Cana, an intellectual and a medic, in January 1979, and it initially has a very strong hold in the west of the country, but spreads throughout the country. It's supported by Paul Goma, that writer I mentioned earlier, and you see new branches emerging all over the country. I think what's interesting here is to reflect on that moment in 1977 when it looked like perhaps international dissidents would come to Romania and Romania would become part of that international story of dissidents. But then the earthquake strikes, Ceausescu retreats back into the national shell. The response is really not great to the earthquake, but it does sever those international connections. And instead, a localized event, the Jiu Valley miner strike, creates a new movement which is very nationally based and doesn't have the same kind of international connections as Charter 77 or the attempts and hopes that Stäbling, Goma and others had had in 1977. Now, what can we learn from this? Well, we can learn that while our experiences in 2020 feel very profound, and they are very profound, it shows that historical comparison can reveal sort of parallels and make us think about those tensions between internationalism, nationalism, and networks, transnational narratives and networks. They have historical precedents. And so the current crises that we are facing, pandemics, nationalism, breakdown of international cooperation, and so on, is not just a moment for academia to teach the world, which I think is often sort of the impetus that many of us have. We need to teach them how to do things properly, but we also need to learn what failures of international cooperation or indeed transnational narratives have been and have existed in the past, and maybe translate that particular insight at least into the present day.